You'll remember where you were when these photos surfaced. Not because they were beautiful, because they weren't supposed to exist. For months, whispers circled through astronomy forums and encrypted chats. Something had changed in the images of 3I Atlas. The glow was different, sharper, too organized to be a comet. Then, one night, a handful of photographs appeared in a quiet archive. No mission tags, no source watermark, only timestamps and silence. At first glance, the object looked familiar, just another streak of blue dust moving across black space. But when researchers enhanced the exposure, the blue didn't scatter like gas. It formed edges, straight, cold, geometric edges, lines that shouldn't exist in nature. Scientists tried to write it off. Sensor noise, processing glitch, maybe even a cosmic ray strike. But the second frame ruined that explanation. The same lines appeared again, perfectly parallel, like ribs in a structure. And in that instant, denials started to sound like fear. If you followed the 3I Atlas story, you know how this goes. Every discovery is met with a cover, every anomaly wrapped in a review. Yet this time, something felt different, because these photos weren't captured by NASA or any Western agency at all. They were traced to an independent array stationed in Southeast Asia. A telescope built for weather tracking, not deep space. And still, it caught something the largest observatories somehow missed. When Harvard analysts cleaned the noise, what emerged looked engineered. Surfaces that reflected light evenly from impossible angles. Metallic shading that shifted too fast for ice. The color gradient wasn't random, it was precise. As if a material was actively controlling how light escaped it. Cold objects don't shine blue. That's basic physics. Yet 3I Atlas glowed with the hue of ionized plasma, the kind that requires power, not reflection. One scientist described it quietly. It's as if the surface is choosing which photons to show us. That sentence never made it into the official report. When the same images reached NASA's internal review board, they were tagged pending. No press release, no public upload. Just a note buried in an internal memo. Polarization data inconsistent with known cometary bodies. Inconsistent. A small word for a massive problem. Because when researchers examined the polarization pattern, the way sunlight bounces off the surface, they found something only seen in one other place: engineered metals. Not rough rock, not frozen vapor. Something layered, controlled, intentional. And then came the thermal maps. They should have been simple. Sunlight hits, heat spreads, infrared flares up. But 3I Atlas didn't heat like a comet. It cooled itself. The energy dispersed along narrow lines that acted like heat sinks, pulling radiation away from the core. That kind of precision doesn't happen by accident. When those results leaked, an internal meeting at Harvard ended in silence. A physicist finally said what everyone avoided. This looks less like geology and more like engineering. But that was just the start. In a sequence of 12 images, analysts noticed something unnerving. The brightest spot on the surface didn't rotate with the body. It stayed fixed, anchored, unmoving, as though locked onto the observer. If it were sunlight, it would shift. If it were random reflection, it would flicker. But this point tracked, deliberately, as if the object knew it was being watched. Across the Atlantic, data analysts tried to replicate the pattern. They couldn't. Every algorithm built to simulate natural light failed. Only one model produced a match: a rotating surface equipped with an adjustable reflector. And suddenly, what was once a comet began to look like something else entirely. In private, some scientists used a forbidden word: propulsion. Not gas jets, not solar push. Propulsion, the kind that requires intention. Avi Loeb from Harvard recalculated the motion using momentum conservation. The numbers made no sense. For the object to accelerate as it did, it would need to eject billions of tons of mass. No telescope saw any cloud. No debris, no plume, no tail. The universe had been violated by its own math. Loeb's conclusion was simple but terrifying. Something inside is pushing it. Something we didn't build. That statement wasn't broadcast. It leaked. And once it did, the internet went quiet. For a few days, the world watched as scientists argued in coded language. Words like non-passive motion and internal drive mechanism started appearing in papers that weren't supposed to exist. Then came the deletion orders. Links vanished. Accounts froze. But the photos once released were impossible to erase. Independent astronomers began uploading frame-by-frame analyses. Each one found the same anomaly: a faint outline across the underside of the object. Even in low light, it traced a shape that didn't belong in nature. Symmetry. Hexagonal. Measured to within less than a degree of perfection. Someone wrote, "It looks printed." Another observer compared the spacing between the ridges and found exact repetition 37 meters apart, edge to edge. Natural fractures never repeat like that. Manufactured patterns do. At that point, the argument shifted from disbelief to damage control. NASA officials said the data required further analysis. The European Space Agency claimed no knowledge of the new frames. But the silence said more than denial ever could. When Michio Kaku was asked about it in a live segment, he smiled nervously before answering. He said, "If the images are genuine, then we're not witnessing a coincidence. We're witnessing control." His words spread faster than the pictures themselves. By morning, 3i Atlas was everywhere again. On news feeds, on conspiracy channels, in classrooms where professors tried to calm students by calling it an illusion of exposure. But the more people looked, the less it felt like illusion. One astrophotographer adjusted the gamma curves on the leaked frames and revealed a faint trail behind the object, 3 small points following at perfect distance, too steady to be stars, too aligned to be noise, 3 companions, 3 silent shadows moving in formation. No one could explain them. And suddenly, the question changed. It was no longer, what is 3i Atlas? It became, who else is with it? Because when an object behaves like it's being escorted, it stops being an object. It becomes a convoy. And in that word lies everything humanity isn't ready to admit. Officials tried again to slow the fire. Press releases asked for caution in interpretation. Government spokespeople urged patience. But patience had already run out. People had seen too much. You can't unsee geometry where none should be. You can't unknow patterns that speak in prime numbers. And maybe that's why these photos were hidden in the first place. Not because they were fake, but because they were too real. The kind of real that asks questions no one can answer without rewriting what it means to be human. What if it's not just a comet passing by? What if it's a message carved in metal and motion sent across centuries, waiting for us to learn how to look up? And what if we finally did? For the first time in decades, every major observatory on Earth aimed at a single target. In Chile, telescopes swept through the thin desert air, following the strange blue body as it crossed the horizon. In Hawaii, instruments tuned to the faintest spectrums waited for proof that the object was still just rock and ice. But even before the data came in, everyone knew the answer. 3i Atlas was breaking every rule comets were supposed to follow. It wasn't spinning the way it should. It wasn't losing mass. It wasn't behaving like it belonged here. And then came the second set of images taken from a European satellite, not meant for deep space at all. It had been testing climate sensors when it caught the edge of the object's path. For 12 frames, it tracked something extraordinary. The light around 3i Atlas didn't scatter randomly. It bent, curved, as if guided by invisible fields. A subtle glow pulsed through the thin halo of particles behind it, too even to be natural, too clean to be chaos. When scientists analyzed the pattern, the pulse rate matched a harmonic sequence found in certain engineered oscillators. Not random. Regular. Measured. It was as if the object's surface was resonating with its own internal rhythm. No one said the word signal. Not yet. But the whisper had begun. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, simulations were running nonstop. They tried to fit 3i Atlas into a model, a comet with unbalanced jets, an asteroid reflecting polarized light, even a debris cluster accidentally shaped by magnetic flow. None of them worked. Every attempt failed in the same way. The numbers didn't bend. They broke. Every law of motion said the same thing. What they were seeing should be impossible. Then, someone tried something different. They fed the data into a propulsion model used for low-thrust ion drives, the kind used in human satellites. The match was disturbingly close. Not perfect, but close enough to make one engineer step back and whisper, "It looks guided." That phrase leaked in an internal chat log the next morning. Within hours, screenshots flooded social media. Half the world laughed. The other half held its breath. Because if 3I Atlas was guided, it wasn't just moving. It was traveling with purpose. Harvard's team released a statement that same evening, carefully worded to sound neutral. They said, "We cannot confirm artificial origin, but the structural regularities observed in new frames warrant further study." Translation: we think it's built, but we can't say that out loud. The next day, a new voice entered the discussion. Dr. Mei Chen, an optical engineer from the University of Hong Kong, presented her analysis of the same frames. She had measured the symmetry of the blue light patterns and discovered something eerie, perfect mathematical spacing in the variations of intensity. Every 12 seconds, the brightness rose and fell by the same fraction. 12 seconds, again and again, across hours of footage. It wasn't noise. It wasn't error. It was rhythm. When she compared the sequence to cosmic background noise, it didn't fit. When she matched it against solar wind fluctuation, it didn't fit either. The only thing it resembled was an artificial pulse train, like the kind used to calibrate communication systems. That was the moment scientists stopped arguing about whether it was real. They started arguing about what it was trying to say. Michio Kaku addressed it on live television that week. He said, "If the data is true, then we may be witnessing the first example of an intelligent pattern not born on Earth." He didn't smile. He didn't dramatize. He simply said it as a fact, waiting for proof. But proof doesn't always arrive in the way you expect. 2 nights later, Japan's space agency captured another anomaly. A faint stream of light followed the object, 3 smaller fragments moving in tight formation. They weren't random pieces of rock. Each fragment kept perfect distance, as if bound by a shared command. When plotted against 3I Atlas's rotation, the formation adjusted to maintain alignment, like satellites around a parent body. For the first time, the word fleet appeared in an official transcript. It was later edited out. But the version that circulated before the correction had already been copied thousands of times. Theories multiplied overnight. Some said it was a probe left behind by an older civilization. Others called it an autonomous messenger, powered by physics we haven't yet learned. A few went darker, suggesting surveillance, reconnaissance, or something watching more than stars. But while the world argued, the data kept building. Each new photo exposed sharper lines, smoother arcs, cleaner geometry. No matter how you looked at it, the randomness was gone. And what was left looked like intention. The next discovery came quietly. A graduate student at Cambridge was reviewing spectral data from the object's reflection when she found a chemical fingerprint that shouldn't exist. Nickel and iron, separated in a ratio too precise for natural formation. On Earth, you can only create that pattern through metallurgy. In space, it doesn't happen. Unless someone designed it that way, the student shared her findings online before realizing what she'd done. Within hours, her post vanished. Her account was locked. But the screenshots lived on. That night, an anonymous report surfaced claiming the U.S. Department of Defense had classified the new data. No official confirmation ever came. But when journalists requested the same photos through public channels, they were told the files were under review. That phrase became a joke among scientists. Under review meant never coming back. Still, the silence only fueled the curiosity. Smaller observatories began working independently, pointing every lens they had toward 3I Atlas. And what they found deepened the mystery. At its brightest phase, the object didn't just glow, it pulsed in intervals of prime numbers. 2, 3, 5, 7. Repeating. Mathematics written in light. Someone, somewhere, was counting, or waiting for someone who could. By now, the pattern was undeniable. Every nation wanted its own piece of the mystery. China released its own report days later. They called the readings anomalous but consistent. They stopped short of using the word artificial. But their data showed the same strange alloy signature, the same clean symmetry, the same impossible rhythm. And then, almost as suddenly as it appeared, 3I Atlas changed course. Not much, just a small drift off its previous trajectory, but enough for every instrument tracking it to panic. Natural bodies don't turn like that. Not without an external force. Not without control. Harvard recalculated the path. It was now moving slightly upward, out of the ecliptic plane, toward empty space, like it had finished what it came to do. That night, Michio Kaku posted just one sentence on his feed. If this is guidance, we are not watching a rock. We are watching a decision. And for once, the internet didn't mock him. It just went still. Everyone knew what that meant. If the object had made a decision, then somewhere behind that glow, there was will. And with will comes awareness. And awareness changes everything. In the following weeks, everything changed. The story that began as a rumor on science boards had become a global event. Every telescope, every data feed, every fragment of attention was locked on one silent question drifting through space. What is 3I Atlas? Governments held emergency meetings disguised as climate briefings. Agencies that rarely spoke to each other were suddenly coordinating under encrypted networks. Behind the scenes, it wasn't curiosity anymore, it was containment. NASA's public feed went offline for 2 hours one morning. When it returned, the archived 3I Atlas footage was gone. In its place, a single message: file restricted under international data review. People noticed immediately. Because in science, data isn't locked away unless someone's afraid of what it says. Meanwhile, the European Space Agency quietly released an update. They didn't call it a discovery. They called it an incident. Their instruments had detected an electromagnetic anomaly near 3I Atlas, short, rhythmic bursts in the same 12-second intervals that Mei Chen had identified earlier. But this time, the signal wasn't just reflection. It was emission. Active transmission. The object was broadcasting. When the first spectrogram was decoded, analysts found a repeating frequency modulation, 11 precise spikes, each separated by 1.618 seconds. The golden ratio. Not random. Not noise. A pattern of perfection. The news leaked within hours. Harvard confirmed the signature matched no known cosmic source. Radio telescopes across Chile and South Africa reported the same readings. One technician simply said, "It's like it's humming to itself." The next 48 hours rewrote everything. Because buried in those transmissions was something even more impossible. Tiny amplitude shifts that, when plotted visually, formed geometric outlines. 10 concentric rings. A single diagonal slashed through their center. No one could agree on what it meant, but the number matched too neatly. 10 anomalies. 10 impossible readings. 10 unanswered questions since the first photo dropped. NASA never commented, but a quiet note appeared in their internal database. Sequence resembles encoded vector signature. A polite way of saying map. That word map spread like fire. Suddenly, everyone had a theory. Some said it was coordinates to another object. Others claimed it was a trajectory. A few dared to whisper that it wasn't showing a path through space, but through time. Michio Kaku gave another interview that night. His voice was calm, almost reverent. He said, "If the signal truly follows the golden ratio, then this isn't just data, it's design. Nature doesn't compose in symmetry that perfect without reason." Around the world, people began staring at the sky again. They weren't astronomers. They were ordinary people, teachers, drivers, children standing outside at night, trying to see a blue point that most telescopes couldn't even resolve. It didn't matter. For the first time in generations, the human race was looking in the same direction. And then, another twist. A private observatory in Norway published infrared data showing heat signatures inside the object. Not surface reflections, internal emission. The readings pulsed every 12 seconds, perfectly in sync with the light rhythm. Whatever 3I Atlas was, it wasn't inert. It was alive in some mechanical sense. At this point, silence became dangerous. Scientists who tried to calm the public were drowned out by others who refused to stay quiet. Avi Loeb, still at Harvard, stepped forward again. He said, if the emissions are internal, then the structure is hollow. And if it's hollow, it was built. That single line made headlines everywhere. Governments scrambled to regain control of the story. They called for patience, review, diplomacy, words that mean nothing when the sky itself has started to speak. Meanwhile, social media caught a new phrase, the mirror theory. It suggested 3i Atlas wasn't just sending a message outward, it was responding to one. A reflection across space, echoing a pattern we might have broadcast unknowingly decades ago. It wasn't a visitor. It was an answer. Mathematicians revisited old transmissions, the radio bursts humanity had sent into the void since the 1,970 seconds. One stood out, the Arecibo message. Binary patterns, prime sequences, human DNA, coordinates of Earth. For the first time, someone noticed that the spacing of 3i Atlas's signal matched the time code of that transmission exactly. The probability of coincidence was microscopic. The implication, immeasurable. Had something received our message and sent a reply in the only language that couldn't be lost? No one knew, but every new image seemed to push the answer closer. The object's surface, once thought smooth, now revealed deeper textures, overlapping plates, faint grids, circular ports like apertures. They reflected light, not randomly, but directionally, like lenses adjusting. At times, it even dimmed itself when solar radiation spiked, as though shielding its interior from excess heat. Behavior, reaction, adaptation. Each discovery felt heavier than the last. You could feel it in the voices of reporters, in the tremor of scientists reading their own data aloud. It wasn't just wonder anymore, it was recognition. The more we studied 3i Atlas, the more it began to resemble us. Structured, curious, built to observe and endure. And then, one morning, the data stream stopped. Every telescope locked onto its coordinates saw nothing. No signal, no reflection, no trace, gone. For 6 hours, the world thought we'd lost it. But at 4:47 UTC, the signal reappeared, shifted slightly toward the blue end of the spectrum, sharper, cleaner. It wasn't a disappearance. It was a reset, as if the object had powered down, reoriented, and reactivated. In the silence of control rooms from Houston to Tokyo, one unspoken realization crept in. It wasn't just traveling through space. It was learning how to be seen. After that night, nothing on Earth felt still. Even silence seemed to hum with its rhythm. The pulse of 3i Atlas, 12 seconds, then 11, then 8, kept narrowing, tightening, like it was preparing for something. Telescopes tracked it day and night, even those never meant for deep space observation. Weather satellites, spy satellites, orbital stations, everyone was looking. And all of them saw the same thing. It was getting brighter. At first, the increase seemed normal. Reflection, sunlight, nothing more. But when the light intensity began doubling without any change in its distance from the sun, the math stopped working again. Cold things don't generate energy. Yet 3i Atlas glowed like a blue heart, pulsing against the void. Then, in one of the last verified photos before blackout, analysts noticed a faint shimmer surrounding it. Not gas, not dust, something finer. It looked like a field. The reflection spectrum changed slightly, bending wavelengths in a way that suggested electromagnetic distortion. When plotted across frames, the distortion wasn't random. It was shaped, contained. A bubble in space, holding pressure against nothing. Harvard's internal memo was blunt. Possible energy envelope source, unknown. That line would later vanish from their official statement. But it didn't matter. Copies spread. Screenshots multiplied. And the public understood exactly what scientists couldn't say aloud. This wasn't an accident of physics. It was control. Michio Kaku called it an act of intention on a cosmic scale. He said, "We've always believed the laws of nature are fixed, but maybe what we're seeing isn't a violation, it's a demonstration. Within hours, governments began tightening data access. Observatories reported interference on private networks, encrypted feeds, downtime. Then, a message from the Deep Space Network leaked online. Priority Target 7. A. Do not redistribute telemetry. People had to screenshot fast. It was gone minutes later. But the words said enough. They had classified the sky. And then came the event everyone would remember. December 3rd, 2025, 2:11 UTC. All major telescopes recorded a synchronized spike from 3I Atlas, a surge in brightness strong enough to register in the naked eye range, visible from northern Europe and parts of Canada. It wasn't a flare. It was a pattern. 3 pulses. Pause. Then 2 more. Pause. Then 1 long, sustained glow that lasted 47 seconds before fading back into the dark. 6 beats. Some called it countdown. Others called it signature. But to mathematicians, the spacing matched the Fibonacci sequence. Nature's language of growth. The same ratio encoded in the shells of seas, the spirals of galaxies, and the architecture of life itself. The signal wasn't random. It was chosen. In Japan, a radio telescope array caught something even stranger. Embedded within the last sustained glow were faint, low-frequency oscillations, far below audible range but repeating perfectly across channels. When they translated the waveform into a visual grid, it formed something hauntingly human. A spiral 10 rings crossing through a single diagonal line. The same symbol hidden in earlier transmissions. No one could explain how a comet could generate structured electromagnetic output. No one tried to anymore. The old language of denial didn't fit. Harvard and NASA released a joint statement calling 3I Atlas a phenomenon of undetermined classification. 3 words that changed everything. Undetermined classification meant it wasn't natural, but they weren't ready to say what it was instead. Across the world, reactions split like tectonic plates. Some felt terror. Some faith. But beneath the noise, a quieter realization began to surface. We had always waited for a message from beyond radio. Beacon, landing craft. We assumed intelligence would shout across the stars. But what if intelligence whispered instead, through beauty, through symmetry, through light itself? Michio Kaku once said the greatest sign of intelligence is restraint. That advanced civilizations wouldn't conquer, they'd demonstrate. They'd show you just enough to recognize them, then vanish to let you think. And maybe that's what 3I Atlas had done. Because 3 days later, the object began to fade. Not quickly, not like a dying ember, but gradually, as if it were pulling its own light back into itself. Each hour, the brightness dropped in perfect mathematical decay. The pulse slowed, spacing back to 12 seconds, then 15, until finally, it went dark. Telescopes kept searching for days. Nothing. No debris. No signal. No orbit. Just absence, sharp and perfect. And yet, something strange lingered. A thin band of polarized radiation remained where the object had once been, circling like an invisible scar in space. The wavelength matched the same frequencies Earth's ionosphere emits naturally, like a mirror tuned to our own reflection. When Harvard presented their final analysis, they didn't call it proof. They called it an invitation. The closing line of their report read, "Whatever 3I Atlas was, it behaved as though observation itself was the experiment. Maybe it was never meant to be found. Maybe it came only to see if we were ready to notice." Weeks later, Michio Kaku gave his final public statement on the phenomenon. He stood before a dark screen showing nothing but a single blue dot, the last confirmed frame before the disappearance. He said quietly, "For centuries, we've looked into the cosmos, asking who's out there. Maybe the question was never who. Maybe it was when." And for a moment, he didn't need to explain. Everyone watching understood, because that's what 3I Atlas had left behind. Not fear, not answers, but awareness. The awareness that we might not be alone, and that whoever or whatever was out there had just reminded us how small and how extraordinary our gaze can be. The sky went quiet again, but no one looked away. For the first time in history, Humanity wasn't staring into darkness. It was staring into a mirror.